The sky above Earth turned dark as a massive alien ship descended, blocking out the sunlight. It was so large that it covered entire cities, casting long shadows over the land. People everywhere watched in shock and fear as the enormous vessel hovered silently, its surface shimmering with strange lights. No one knew what to expect, but it quickly became clear that this was not a friendly visit. In a quiet town in Colorado, Ethan Carter stood in his garage, staring at the television screen. The news anchors were speaking frantically, their voices trembling as they described the alien ship appearing over major cities around the world. Ethan's wife, Claire, walked in holding their 6-year-old daughter, Lily. Her face was pale with worry. "What do you think they want?" she asked softly. Ethan shook his head. "I don't know, but I doubt it's anything good." He had served in the military years ago, and though he now worked as a mechanic, his instincts told him this wasn't going to end well. The sight of the alien ship made his stomach churn. Something about it felt wrong, like a predator circling its prey. As if on cue, the first attack began. Bright beams of light shot down from the ship, striking buildings and causing explosions that rocked the ground. Panic erupted instantly. Cars screeched down streets as people tried to escape, while others ran into their homes, hoping to find safety. The sound of screams filled the air, mixing with the deafening roar of destruction. Ethan grabbed Claire's hand. "We need to get out of here. Now." Without wasting another second, the family climbed into their old truck. Ethan started the engine and sped away from their house, leaving behind everything they owned. Behind them, the town was already falling apart. Fires raged through neighborhoods, and black smoke billowed into the sky. The once peaceful streets were now chaotic, with people running in every direction. On the road, they joined a stream of vehicles fleeing the area. Everyone seemed to be heading toward the mountains, where the dense forests might offer some protection. Ethan kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other tightly gripping Claire's. Lily sat quietly in the backseat, clutching her favorite stuffed bear. She didn't cry, but her wide eyes showed how scared she was. Hours later, after driving nonstop, the Carters stopped at a gas station near the edge of the forest. They needed fuel and supplies before continuing their journey. While Ethan filled up the tank, Claire went inside to grab food and water. That's when they met Rachel, a young woman who looked just as frightened as everyone else. Rachel introduced herself and explained that she was a scientist who had been studying signals from space for years. "These aliens, they are called the Krill," she said nervously. "From what I've gathered, they travel across galaxies, destroying civilizations. They see us as nothing more than animals to hunt or experiment on." Ethan frowned. "You mean they're here to kill us?" Rachel nodded. "That's exactly what I mean. But we can't give up. If we work together, maybe we have a chance." Her words stuck with Ethan. For the first time since the invasion began, he felt a spark of hope. Maybe humanity wasn't completely helpless. As they drove deeper into the wilderness, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much bigger fight. Little did he know, his role in the battle for Earth's survival was about to become far greater than he ever imagined. After days of traveling, Ethan, Claire, and Lily found themselves deep in the mountains, far from the chaos of the cities. They had joined a small group of survivors who were camping near a river. The air was cold, and the nights were long, but being surrounded by trees and wildlife gave them a sense of safety, at least for now. Among the group was Rachel, the scientist, who spent most of her time explaining what she knew about the Krill to anyone who would listen. "The Krill don't just destroy planets," Rachel said one evening as everyone gathered around a campfire. "They hunt. They take the strongest and the smartest of each species and use them for their own twisted purposes. If we don't fight back, they'll wipe us out." Ethan sat quietly, his arms crossed. He didn't need convincing. Every day, he thought about the people they'd left behind. The friends, neighbors, and strangers who hadn't been able to escape. He couldn't shake the image of the alien beams tearing through buildings, reducing homes to rubble. But fighting back wasn't going to be easy. The Krill had technology far beyond anything humans could imagine. How could ordinary people stand a chance against such powerful enemies? The next morning, the group woke up to the sound of distant explosions. Smoke rose in the distance, signaling that the Krill were still hunting. It was only a matter of time before they reached the mountains. Ethan knew they couldn't stay hidden forever. They needed a plan, and fast. Later that afternoon, while scouting the area, Ethan and Rachel stumbled upon another group of survivors. These people weren't hiding. They were preparing to fight. Their leader, a tall man named Alex, greeted them with a firm handshake. "We're not going to let those monsters win," Alex said confidently. "We've started gathering weapons and supplies. If we hit them hard enough, maybe we can slow them down." Alex introduced Ethan and Rachel to Mia, a former soldier with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. She had already organized the group into teams, each with a specific role. Some scavenged for food and materials, while others worked on building traps and makeshift weapons. When Ethan mentioned his military background, Mia immediately asked him to help train the fighters. For the first time since the invasion began, Ethan felt like he had a purpose. Over the next few days, he worked tirelessly with Mia to teach the survivors how to defend themselves. They practiced using whatever tools they could find: knives, axes, even sharpened sticks. Rachel, meanwhile, focused on studying pieces of Krill technology that had been recovered from crashed drones. She hoped to find a weakness they could exploit. One evening, as Ethan sat by the fire cleaning a knife, Claire approached him. "Do you really think we can beat them?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan looked at her and smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I do know one thing. We can't just sit here and wait for them to come for us. We have to try." Claire nodded, though fear lingered in her expression. She glanced over at Lily, who was playing quietly with a few other children. "For her," Claire said softly. "We have to do this for her." As the days passed, the group grew stronger. They learned to work together, sharing ideas and strategies. Rachel made progress deciphering the alien tech, discovering patterns in how the Krill communicated and moved. With each new piece of information, their chances of survival improved. But the Krill were relentless, and their presence loomed larger with every passing hour. One night, as Ethan stood guard, he gazed up at the stars. The alien ship still hung in the sky, a constant reminder of the threat above. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel anger, not just fear. Earth belonged to humanity, and he wasn't ready to give it up without a fight. Whatever happened next, he vowed to protect his family and do everything in his power to stop the Krill. The resistance group had grown over the past week. More survivors trickled in from nearby towns, bringing stories of destruction and loss. Some were injured, others exhausted, but all shared a determination to fight back. Ethan, Claire, and Lily settled into a routine within the camp, helping wherever they could. Ethan spent most of his time training new recruits, while Claire cared for the wounded and helped organize supplies. Lily stayed close to her mother, often playing quietly with other children under the watchful eyes of the adults. Rachel worked tirelessly on the pieces of Krill technology she had collected. Late at night, by the dim light of a lantern, she pored over diagrams and notes, trying to make sense of the alien systems. One evening, she called Ethan and Alex over to share what she had discovered. "I think I've found something," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "Their drones have a flaw. They're vulnerable to electromagnetic pulses." Ethan frowned. "An EMP, like the kind that knocks out electronics." Rachel nodded. "Exactly. If we can generate a strong enough pulse, we might be able to disable their drones and even parts of their ships. The problem is, creating an EMP powerful enough requires a lot of energy. We'd need access to a power grid or some kind of generator." Alex crossed his arms, thinking, "That's risky. The Krill are always near areas with power sources. Getting close enough to set up an EMP would mean walking straight into their territory. But it's worth a shot, Ethan said firmly. If it works, we could cripple their operations long enough to strike back harder. Mia, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. We'll need a team for this, someone who knows how to move quickly and stay hidden. I'll go. So will I, Ethan added without hesitation. He glanced at Claire, expecting her to argue, but she simply nodded. She knew as well as he did that this was necessary. The next morning, the group finalized their plan. They decided to target a krill outpost located near a hydroelectric dam. The dam still had functioning generators, which would provide the energy needed for the EMP. Rachel gave them a small device she had built, explaining how to activate it once they reached the site. Be careful, she warned. If the krill catch you, there won't be a second chance. As the team prepared to leave, Claire pulled Ethan aside. Promise me you'll come back, she said, her voice trembling. Ethan hugged her tightly. I promise. I'll do whatever it takes. The journey to the dam was tense. The team moved cautiously through the forest, avoiding open spaces where they could be spotted. At one point, they heard the distant hum of krill drones patrolling the skies. Maya signaled for everyone to take cover, and they crouched low until the sound faded away. When they finally reached the dam, the sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The massive structure stood against the backdrop of the mountains, its turbines still spinning slowly. Around it, krill drones floated like mechanical insects, scanning the area for threats. The team waited until nightfall before making their move. Under the cover of darkness, they crept closer to the generators. Ethan carried the EMP device, clutching it tightly as if it were a lifeline. As they reached the control room, Maya disabled the locks on the door, and the group slipped inside. Rachel's instructions were clear. Connect the device to the main power source and activate it. But just as Ethan began setting up the EMP, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, and the hum of approaching drones grew louder. We've been spotted, Mia hissed. Hurry. Ethan's hands trembled as he worked, sweat dripping down his face. The others stood guard, ready to hold off the krill for as long as possible. Outside, the sound of explosions echoed as drones opened fire. Time was running out. Finally, Ethan pressed the button. A burst of energy surged through the air, and the lights flickered before going dark. The drones froze mid-air, then plummeted to the ground like dead weight. For a moment, there was silence. It worked, Mia whispered, relief washing over her face. But their victory was short-lived. Through the window, they saw more krill forces descending toward the dam. We need to move. Now, Ethan shouted. The team grabbed their gear and sprinted into the shadows, knowing they had only bought themselves a little more time. Despite the danger ahead, Ethan felt a spark of hope. Humanity wasn't done fighting. Not yet. The team barely escaped the dam alive. As they ran through the forest, the sound of krill reinforcements closing in made every step feel like it could be their last. Ethan carried the EMP device in one hand and held his rifle in the other, his heart pounding as he glanced over his shoulder. Maya led the way, her sharp eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of danger. Behind them, the hum of alien drones grew louder, their red lights cutting through the trees like search beams. We can't keep running forever, Maya said between breaths. We need to lose them. Ethan nodded. There's a cave system up ahead. If we can reach it, we might be able to hide. They pushed forward, legs burning with exhaustion, until they reached the mouth of a narrow cave. The group slipped inside, staying low to avoid detection. The air was cool and damp, and the sound of dripping water echoed faintly. Ethan and Mia took position at the entrance, watching as the krill drones hovered outside, searching for movement. After several tense minutes, the drones moved on, their lights fading into the distance. Once it was safe, Rachel examined the EMP device. It drained most of its power at the dam, she said, frowning. But there's still enough left for one more use, if we're careful. Alex sighed. One more shot. That's not much to work with. It'll have to be enough, Ethan replied firmly. He turned to the group. We've seen what these things can do. If we don't hit them hard, they'll keep coming after us. We need to strike where it hurts, right at their command center. Rachel nodded in agreement. I've been studying their patterns. They're coordinating everything from a central location. If we take that out, we could disrupt their entire operation. The team spent the next few hours planning their next move. They knew the risk was enormous, but the stakes were too high to back down. Claire and Lily were waiting for Ethan back at the camp, and he couldn't bear the thought of letting them down. Every decision he made now felt heavier, knowing that failure meant losing everything. The next morning, the group set out toward the Krill Command Center, located deep within the ruins of Denver. Along the way, they encountered abandoned towns and scorched landscapes, grim reminders of the devastation the aliens had caused. At one point, they stumbled upon a horrifying sight: rows of cages filled with humans. Some were unconscious, others visibly altered, twisted and grotesque, their bodies fused with strange mechanical parts. Mia clenched her fists. This is worse than we thought. Rachel knelt beside one of the cages, examining the prisoners. They're experimenting on us, she whispered, her voice trembling, turning us into weapons against our own kind. Ethan felt a surge of anger. We can't let this continue. Not for one more day. When they finally reached Denver, the city was unrecognizable. Buildings lay in ruins, and the streets were littered with debris. In the center of it all stood the Krill Command Center, a massive structure surrounded by drones and heavily armed guards. The team hid in the shadows, observing the layout and planning their approach. This isn't going to be easy, Alex muttered. Nothing about this has been easy, Ethan replied. But we didn't come this far to give up now. As night fell, the team prepared to make their move. They split into two groups, one to create a distraction, the other to plant the EMP device. Ethan volunteered to lead the second group, knowing the mission depended on getting close enough to activate the device without being caught. The distraction worked perfectly. Explosions rocked the perimeter, drawing the Krill guards away from the command center. Ethan's group seized the opportunity, sneaking inside undetected. The interior was a maze of alien technology, glowing panels lining the walls and strange symbols pulsing with light. This is it, Ethan whispered as they reached the main control room. Get ready. But just as they began setting up the EMP, alarms blared throughout the building. Red lights flashed, and the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the halls. The Krill had discovered them. We're out of time, Mia shouted. Ethan activated the device, and a wave of energy surged outward. The lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the sound of approaching Krill hunters filled the air. Ethan tightened his grip on his weapon. Let's finish this, he said, determination blazing in his eyes. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, humanity had struck a real blow against the invaders. The EMP blast had crippled the Krill Command Center, but it wasn't enough to stop them completely. Ethan and his team fought their way out of the building, dodging Krill hunters who moved with terrifying speed. The aliens were relentless, their glowing eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. Every step felt like a gamble, every breath a risk. Mia led the way, her rifle firing steady bursts as she covered the group's retreat. Keep moving, she shouted over the chaos. Behind her, Ethan carried the now-dead EMP device, its power completely drained. They had done what they came to do, but the cost was high. One of their teammates, a young man named Daniel, had stayed behind to hold off the Krill, buying the others precious seconds to escape. His sacrifice weighed heavily on everyone's minds. As they reached the edge of the city, the group paused to catch their breath. The streets were eerily quiet now, the hum of alien drones replaced by an unsettling stillness. Rachel knelt beside a pile of rubble, clutching her side where a piece of shrapnel had grazed her during the fight. "We need to regroup," she said weakly, "but we can't stop here for long." Ethan nodded, though his thoughts were elsewhere. He kept replaying the mission in his head. The explosions, the screams, the sight of Daniel falling under a hail of alien fire. It was all too much. For a moment, he let himself imagine giving up, walking away from the fight. But then he thought of Claire and Lily, waiting for him back at the camp. He couldn't abandon them, not when there was still hope. "We've hit them hard," Alex said, breaking the silence. "But this isn't over. If we don't keep pushing, they'll recover and come after us even stronger." Rachel looked up, her face pale but resolute. "There's one more thing we can try. I've been working on something. A virus. If we can upload it into their systems, it might disrupt their biological processes. It could weaken them enough for us to finish the job." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "How do we get close enough to upload it?" "That's the problem," Rachel admitted. "Their main server is located deep inside their mothership. Getting there would mean infiltrating their fleet." The group exchanged uneasy glances. Infiltrating the Krill mothership sounded impossible, but they all knew it might be their only chance. Maya spoke first. "If anyone can pull this off, it's us. We've made it this far against all odds." Preparations began immediately. Back at the camp, the survivors rallied together, pooling their resources to create tools and weapons for the mission. Ethan worked closely with Mia to plan every detail, knowing that even the smallest mistake could mean disaster. Claire helped by gathering medical supplies, her hands trembling as she packed bandages and antiseptics. She didn't say much, but her worried glances told Ethan everything he needed to know. The night before the mission, Ethan sat by the fire with Claire and Lily. The little girl was asleep in her mother's arms, her breathing soft and steady. Claire looked at Ethan, tears glistening in her eyes. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "We could find somewhere safe, hide until this is over." Ethan shook his head. "Hiding won't save us. The Krill will never stop hunting us unless we stop them first." He took her hand, squeezing it gently. "I promise I'll come back to you. No matter what happens, I'll make sure we have a future." The next morning, the team set out for the Krill mothership, which loomed in the sky like a second moon. Using scavenged alien tech, they managed to sneak aboard a smaller transport ship that was ferrying supplies to the fleet. The ride was tense, everyone holding their breath as they approached the massive vessel. Once inside, the group split up, each member tasked with disabling key systems while Rachel uploaded the virus. Ethan led the charge, his heart pounding as they navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the ship. The air was cold and metallic, and the walls pulsed faintly with light, as if the ship itself were alive. Suddenly, alarms blared, and red lights flooded the halls. The Krill had detected them. Ethan turned to his team, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. "Stick to the plan. We're not leaving until this is done." One by one, they moved forward, determined to see the mission through. The final battle for Earth's survival was just beginning, and humanity's resolve burned brighter than ever. The alarms blared louder as Ethan and his team raced through the corridors of the Krill mothership. The walls around them seemed to pulse with an eerie light, as though the ship itself was alive and aware of their presence. Every step echoed in the metallic halls, making it nearly impossible to stay quiet. Behind them, the sound of heavy footsteps grew closer. Krill hunters were closing in. "We need to split up," Mia whispered urgently. "They'll overwhelm us if we stay together." Ethan nodded, though the thought of separating made his stomach churn. "Rachel, you go with Alex. Get that virus uploaded no matter what. Maya and I will hold them off." Rachel hesitated for a moment, her eyes wide with fear, but then she nodded. "Be careful," she said softly before disappearing down a narrow corridor with Alex close behind. Ethan turned to Mia. "Let's move." They found a control room nearby and barricaded themselves inside. Using scavenged alien weapons, They prepared to defend their position. It wasn't long before the Krill arrived, their glowing eyes peering through the doorway. The first wave attacked fiercely, their claws slashing at the air. Ethan fired his rifle, each shot hitting its mark, but there were too many of them. Mia fought alongside him, her movements quick and precise. "We can't hold them forever," she shouted over the chaos. "I know," Ethan replied, reloading his weapon. His mind raced, searching for a way out. Then he noticed something. A panel on the wall flickered weakly, damaged during the fight. An idea sparked in his head. "Cover me," he yelled to Mia. She nodded, firing relentlessly to keep the Krill at bay while Ethan worked on the panel. He ripped it open, exposing a tangle of wires and circuits. Pulling out a small device Rachel had given him earlier, he connected it to the exposed system. The lights in the room dimmed briefly before surging back on, brighter than before. "What did you do?" Maya asked, frowning. "Overloaded the power grid," Ethan said with a grim smile. "It should buy us some time." As if on cue, sparks flew from the walls, and part of the ceiling collapsed, blocking the entrance. The Krill screeched in frustration on the other side, their attempts to break through slowing down. Ethan grabbed Mia's arm. "Let's go." They ran through the winding corridors, following the route Rachel and Alex had taken. Along the way, they passed scenes of devastation, rooms filled with strange alien machinery, pools of green liquid leaking from cracked containers, and the remains of human captives who hadn't survived the Krill's experiments. Each sight fueled Ethan's anger, driving him forward despite the exhaustion weighing on his body. Finally, they reached the main server room. Inside, Rachel and Alex were frantically working on a console, their faces illuminated by the glow of the screen. "How's it going?" Ethan asked, panting. "Almost done," Rachel replied without looking up. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, lines of code scrolling rapidly. "Just a few more seconds." Suddenly, the doors burst open, and Krill hunters poured into the room. Ethan and Mia opened fire, their shots echoing in the confined space. The aliens moved fast, dodging most of the bullets, but the distraction gave Rachel the time she needed. "It's done," she shouted, slamming her hand on the console. A low hum filled the room, followed by a series of sharp beeps. The lights flickered violently, and the Krill froze mid-motion, their bodies convulsing as the virus took effect. But the victory was short-lived. One of the Krill lunged at Rachel, knocking her to the ground. Before it could strike, Claire appeared in the doorway, holding a makeshift spear. With a cry, she drove the weapon into the creature's chest, killing it instantly. Ethan stared at her in shock. "Claire, what are you doing here?" "I couldn't let you face this alone," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at him. "I love you, Ethan, but if we're going to survive, we have to do this together." For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The weight of her words hit Ethan like a tidal wave. He wanted to argue, to tell her to leave while she still could, but he knew there was no point. This fight belonged to all of them now. The group regrouped, ready to make their final stand. As the Krill recovered from the initial effects of the virus, their numbers dwindled, their strength faltering. Humanity had struck a critical blow, not just against the invaders, but against despair itself. Together, they would fight until the very end. The virus had done its job, but the Krill weren't finished yet. Though many of them were weakened, their movements slower and less coordinated, they still fought with a ferocity that was terrifying. Ethan and his team stood shoulder to shoulder in the server room, weapons raised, as more Krill hunters poured into the chamber. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burned metal. "We can't stay here," Mia shouted, firing her rifle at an approaching alien. "They'll overwhelm us." Ethan glanced around, his mind racing. He spotted a vent on the wall, just large enough for someone to crawl through. "There," he yelled, pointing. "We'll use that to escape." Rachel nodded, already moving toward it. She climbed up first, pulling herself into the narrow duct. Alex followed, then Claire, who hesitated only briefly before disappearing inside. Ethan covered their retreat, his shots precise even as sweat dripped down his face. Maya stayed by his side, her sharp eyes scanning the room for threats. "Go," she ordered, shoving him toward the vent. "I'll hold them off." "No," Ethan said firmly. "We're not leaving anyone behind." Before Mia could argue, he grabbed her arm and pushed her toward the opening. She hesitated for a moment, then relented, climbing in after Claire. Ethan went last, dragging himself through the tight space as the sounds of battle faded behind him. The vent led them to another part of the ship, closer to the hangar where they had planned their escape. But getting there wouldn't be easy. The corridors were crawling with krill, their glowing eyes scanning every corner. The group moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows and avoiding open areas whenever possible. At one point, they encountered a group of human prisoners, caged and barely alive. Their faces were gaunt, their bodies marked with strange scars from the krill's experiments. Rachel stopped, tears in her eyes. "We have to help them," she whispered. "There's no time," Alex said grimly. "If we try, we'll all die." Ethan clenched his fists, torn between doing what was right and staying alive. Finally, he made a decision. "We'll come back for them. I promise." The prisoners' hollow eyes followed them as they slipped away, guilt weighing heavily on everyone's shoulders. They pressed on, knowing that stopping now meant failure, for themselves and for humanity. When they reached the hangar, they found a small transport ship waiting, its engines humming softly. Ethan recognized it as one of the vessels they had used to infiltrate the mothership. "This is our ride home," he said, relief washing over him. But the krill weren't about to let them leave. As they ran toward the ship, a massive hunter emerged from the shadows, blocking their path. It was bigger than any of the others, its claws gleaming menacingly in the dim light. Behind it, more aliens closed in, cutting off their escape. Claire stepped forward, her hands trembling as she held the makeshift spear she had used earlier. "You're not taking my family," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. The hunter roared, lunging at her. In a split second, Claire thrust the spear forward, driving it deep into the creature's chest. The alien staggered, then collapsed, its glowing eyes fading to black. But before anyone could celebrate, another wave of krill attacked. Ethan fired his weapon, each shot hitting its mark. Mia joined him, her aim as deadly as ever. Together, they carved a path to the ship, shouting for the others to follow. One by one, they boarded, sealing the hatch behind them. As the engines roared to life, Ethan took the controls, guiding the ship out of the hangar. The krill mothership loomed in the distance, its lights flickering erratically as the virus spread through its systems. With a deafening explosion, the massive vessel began to break apart, chunks of debris tumbling into the void. Back on Earth, the survivors watched as the alien fleet retreated, their ships damaged and disorganized. For the first time in weeks, there was hope. Humanity had fought back, and won. But Ethan knew the cost of victory. As he looked at Claire and Lily, sitting quietly in the corner of the cockpit, he felt a deep ache in his chest. So many lives had been lost, so much pain endured. Yet, amidst the destruction, something remarkable had emerged: unity. Humanity had faced its darkest hour and refused to give up. The battle was over, but the scars would remain. And as Ethan gazed out at the stars, he vowed to protect his family and his planet at all costs. The transport ship descended slowly through Earth's atmosphere, its hull scorched from the journey. Below, the planet was battered and scarred, but alive. Fires still burned in some areas, and smoke lingered over cities reduced to rubble, yet the skies were clear of krill ships for the first time in weeks. Ethan guided the vessel toward the mountains where their camp was hidden, his hand steady on the controls despite the exhaustion that weighed him down. When they landed, survivors rushed out to greet them, their faces lighting up with hope at the sight of the returning team. Word had spread quickly about the destruction of the Krill mothership, and people cheered as Ethan, Claire, Lily, and the others stepped off the ship. For a moment, it felt like the world could breathe again. But Ethan didn't join in the celebration. He walked silently to a quiet spot overlooking the valley, his mind heavy with thoughts of those they had lost. Claire followed him, her steps soft against the ground. She stood beside him, wrapping her arms around herself as she gazed at the horizon. "We did it," she said softly, breaking the silence. "We stopped them." Ethan nodded, though his expression remained somber. "For now. But there's so much we've lost. So many who won't come back." Claire reached out, taking his hand in hers. "They fought for us. For everyone. We can honor them by rebuilding what they gave everything to save." Her words struck a chord deep within him. Ethan looked at her, then at Lily, who was playing nearby with other children. Despite everything, there was still laughter in the air. It was fragile, fleeting, but it was there. Humanity wasn't just surviving, it was beginning to heal. Over the next few days, the survivors worked together to clean up the wreckage left behind by the invasion. Teams scoured abandoned towns for supplies, while others began repairing homes and setting up temporary shelters. Rachel dedicated herself to studying the remnants of Krill technology, hoping to learn more about their weaknesses and ensure humanity would never be caught off guard again. Mia took charge of organizing patrols, determined to keep watch for any signs of returning threats. Alex helped coordinate efforts to free the prisoners still trapped in Krill facilities, bringing them back to safety. Each person played a role, no matter how small, in piecing the world back together. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, Ethan stood atop a hill overlooking the camp. The sight filled him with a mix of pride and sorrow. Humanity had faced extinction and refused to yield, but the cost had been immense. He thought of Daniel, who had sacrificed himself to buy the team time, of the prisoners they hadn't been able to save, of all the lives shattered by the Krill. Claire joined him, carrying Lily in her arms. The little girl smiled sleepily, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" Claire asked. Ethan hesitated before answering. "How strong we are. How much we've endured. I used to think we were divided, too different to ever truly come together. But this proves me wrong." Claire smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the lesson we needed to learn, that when it matters most, we're stronger together than we are apart." As night fell, the stars emerged one by one, shining brightly in the clear sky. Ethan looked up at them, feeling a strange sense of peace. Earth belonged to humanity, not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they refused to give up. They had faced the deadliest predators in the universe and survived. For the first time since the invasion began, Ethan allowed himself to believe in a future. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges ahead, wounds that might never fully heal. But as long as people stood together, as long as they fought for each other, there was hope. He glanced down at Lily, her eyes closed in sleep. "We'll rebuild," he whispered, almost to himself. "For you, for all of us." And with that promise, Ethan turned away from the stars and walked back toward the camp, ready to face whatever came next.